Hello, writers. Come write with me. My name is Michaela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my channel, Write with Michaela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is Friday, which is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. If you're writing with me and you wish to exchange chapters, then send your chapter with written permission to writewithmichaela@gmail.com. I will post the email address at the end of the video. I'm looking forward to reading your chapters, even if I can't read them all on the channel. In other words, send it in, with or without written permission. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. This story is PG-13, so if you are under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. This story is also in its rough draft stage, just as the last two stories we heard. The title of the story is Elloni's Pride. And today we are reading chapters 4 and 5 out of book 1. If you would like to read along, then send to the email I stated earlier and request a PDF of the chapter. Make sure you are specific, because you just email me, I'm not going to know, which one. If it's the one that just dropped, or if it's one prior to that. I might even think that it's the one that I'm currently recording, which would not be good. Now let's start. Elloni's Pride, book 1, Breaking Point. This is chapter 4, the last linker, and chapter 5, Breaking Point. Browser was still in prison, and King Daemon still had him chained to the walls, so he couldn't move much. Browser was in a deep state of depression because he didn't know how to get out. Moreover, 2 dragons had hatched, and the symbol on his arm had lit up each time. Guards watched him around the clock, so he was sure they had given the news to the king. Long ago, King Daemon inquired of him where the dragons were and when their eggs would hatch. And he had told King Daemon that he wouldn't know where, ever, and might only know when they hatched based on his symbol. He hadn't added that usually it was a son or a daughter or a brother or a sister dragon or an aunt or a cousin dragon. His symbol didn't light up for the birth of every dragon, and he had hoped that none of the hidden eggs were related to his dragon. For precaution's sake, Browser had told the king that if he killed his dragon, then the symbol on his arm would disappear altogether, and King Daemon had believed him. So, somewhere in this castle dungeon, King Daemon had his dragon also chained up, and King Daemon hadn't given his dragon potions. Suddenly, light burst forth on his forearm and on his symbol, and then he heard talking outside his cell and heard footsteps leading away. Browser could barely reach his arm with his other hand because of the chains. But he slightly rubbed it and thought to Dronsnide, his dragon, "Are all the hidden eggs related to you? This is not good. Those baby dragons can't fight yet." "I don't know whose eggs, but with them hatching, whosoever they are, we need to escape and help them." Browser slightly raised and lowered his arms, although he knew Dronsnide couldn't see him. "I'm a little chained up right now, and even if I could dream up a brilliant plan of escape, I wouldn't know where to even start looking for baby dragons. King Daemontade's men send someone out every time my arm lights up, so they probably find the linkers and kill them." "Let's hope not," thought Dronsnide. "Maybe I've leaked enough water for rust to form." Rouser rolled his eyes and sighed. His dragon was forever hopeful. He thought, maybe, but I don't have enough saliva to even hope for rest. You will be on your own. Something will happen, and we will get out, thought Dronsnide. The people cannot continue to live if they have no hope. Browser thought to himself only, tell me about it. I have no hope, and wouldn't care if I died today. I'm sick of sitting in this cell. Dronside tossed his head a bit. He did this often, so the soldiers wouldn't see it as unusual. He tossed his head again, and he felt movement and heard the chain straining. His hope surged, so he moved his legs a little. He moved as much as he could every day because he didn't want to get out and be useless. Libya was behind Elloni in a narrow and steep passage down off the ridge. When she felt her symbol grow warm, she slightly moved her arm around her bundle and used a finger from her other hand to pull the long sleeve a little. She saw her arm glowing again. She didn't understand because she had found her dragon, but she just shrugged herself and followed Elloni. Soflin had moved south to the river. As she had walked, she had shaken her head to herself several times. The Linkers didn't have time to train and then come back to rescue. The soldiers were killing today. She looked up at the sky and thought deep within herself to the universe. You have provided Bradley, and I feel somehow the soldiers will spare him, and he will head to the boys. Should I leave the boys to him? The boys need more help than Libya needs. I feel Libya is already with her dragon. Which way should I go? Should I go towards Libya? Should I go towards the boys and find the one Bradley doesn't find? Should I stay near the village and see how many are left in the morning? Sophie just held her arms out and closed her eyes. She had asked her questions, so now she needed to be quiet and let the universe let her know. There was a gentle breeze, and the wind whipped around her and played with her hair. She could smell the smoke on the wind, but she just went deeper within herself to get the answer, knowing that the smoke could unduly influence her. She concentrated on breathing in and out several times. Then images entered her mind. She saw Libya, but Libya wasn't with her dragon, and Libya hadn't crossed the river yet. Sophie opened her eyes and puzzled over the images she had seen. She decided that she would cross the river and then follow it west. When it turned northwest, she would turn northwest. She would walk along the river until she got to where Libya should have crossed. And then she would try to magically pick up Libya's trail. Soflin had a charm on Libya and could find her that way. But she felt the vision wanted her to go to where Libya crossed the river. There was something there Soflin needed to find. Soflin glanced over her shoulder, and no soldiers were remotely near. And she looked up and saw all the smoke from the village. She shook her head. Today was a very sad day. But she would continue and do her part. Surely the prophets didn't speak for nothing. Then she thought, surely they didn't. But they didn't speak about Bradley. Bradley got Coulter out, and for good reason. The prophets didn't speak for nothing. We will each do our part and turn this around for the good people, however many of them are left after this. Soflin cast a charm over the river and walked on an invisible glass pane above it. That way she wouldn't get her feet wet. The river wasn't very deep, especially since it hadn't rained recently. Once she crossed the river, she would follow along the edge. When she got into the trees, she would drop her invisibility and conserve her magic. At the edge of the trees there was a valley. Elloni looked over her shoulder several times to look for enemies, but things seemed quiet, so they headed into the valley and the plains beyond. Elloni knew she was looking for her pride, but she wasn't exactly sure where or how to find them. She thought to Libya, "Did you have instructions for this journey?" Libya looked up at Elloni. "Find one dragon, and then another, until I have 10. And then build the dragons not under bad potions, and then rescue the people in the village." Bad potions? Yes, apparently King Damantade has a witch to make potions, and the potions make the dragons loyal to only him, and not to the people the dragons love. So what I'm hearing is we need to find a way to get the dragons off the potions, thought Elloni. Are the potions a one-time thing, which we have to undo? Are they daily things, which we have to stop? Libya shrugged. "I don't know," she said. Then she thought, "I don't know, but I wouldn't think it was a one-time thing. Well, I don't know. When I eat or drink, I have to eat again. But if I hurt myself and it leaves a mark, the mark might be forever. My sister and I had to be careful if I wanted to go out. If I had a mark that she didn't, then we would have to cover that area." Elloni thought about the information, and she couldn't say if the potion was something to go in the body to squelch hunger or thirst, or if the potions hurt the dragons and left a mark. She hoped the information would open up now that Libya explained things, but no other information surfaced in her mind. They continued walking in their own thoughts without linking to each other. Okay, now we're at chapter 5, Breaking Point. After several hours, when the homes were but embers, save for the brick chimneys, soldiers pulled out. Dusk had given way to dark, and the full moon was high in the sky. The soldiers had killed many villagers besides Jarson. They had killed several parents, including Coulter's parents, and several children. Lydia had held on tightly to her younger sister and not let her get up again. Once was close enough. As the soldiers pulled out, Hoshman glanced at the village garden. The soldiers had just walked through it, and not around it, so they trampled it and left it mostly destroyed. He closed his eyes to himself and slightly shook his head. They could not go on like this. They could not keep living here, where the soldiers could come in and kill whenever they pleased. When the soldiers left, no one got up immediately. They just sat with their backs to the fire. Children who had missed naps were cranky, but they didn't cry or whine. They just rubbed their eyes. Parents had tried to keep their children quiet and tried to soothe them a few times. But the soldiers killed 2 toddlers who just cried, and the parents couldn't hush. Of course, the soldiers killed one mother of the toddlers when she wouldn't let the child go. All these images ran through their minds again as the full moon light shone down on them. And as the soldiers walked away, tears started flowing down their faces. The tears they had been too scared to cry with the soldiers there. But it would take several hours for their hearts to stop gripping their chest. Finally, after half an hour or an hour, a few people got up and went to the ashes of their home. Between the fires and the moon, they had a little light to search for a few mementos, but not enough to really see anything. Lydia pulled her sister up and then pushed her into her mother's lap. Once her mother had a hold of Lydia. Lydia went straight to where she had put the blankets. But there was nothing left of her sister. Then something clicked in her. and she decided she was going to find Libya. Maybe she couldn't link with the dragon, but she could do other things. She could gather berries, or wash dishes, or something. She glanced around and moved south away from the house and towards the dark. Then, in her mind, she pictured herself in the tunnel and started heading the same direction as the tunnel. She didn't want people to see her, so if someone was near, she would stop in the dark. Hushman's home had been east of Jorson's, but his son's stash was just west of it. When Hushman's family got up, Bradley headed towards the stash. He hadn't added any more to it, but he went there to think through the day's events. Hushman followed his son, while his wife gathered the rest of the children, 2 boys and a girl. She would follow Hushman, or if he turned to their home, she would go there. But for now, it felt a bit better to stand with a good distance between her and the fire. She held her youngest child in her arms and ran her hand through the next youngest child's hair. These things comforted her as much as they did the children. Bradley reached where the wood stack was, and he turned to face his father. He took in a deep breath and held it. Hushman knew his son's thoughts, because he felt the same. He said very softly, "Just go." He nodded his head towards the south. "Drop out of the light and go. They need you." Bradley wanted to hug his father, but his eyes glanced around at the people moving around in the ashes of their own homes. They were all swallowed in sorrow and probably wouldn't notice. He looked back at his father and said softly, "I will make you proud." "You already have," said the father softly. "You already have," he said again. He glanced over his shoulder. "Go while they're occupied." Bradley backed up into the dark. He came very near Lydia, but he didn't notice her because she had sidestepped out of his way. Once Bradley moved east, Hushman saw Lydia, and suddenly he knew she was a twin, and he knew she was leaving. He motioned to her to wait, and then he glanced around at the people. His wife was hanging back because she hadn't wanted to interfere with his exchange with Bradley. Hushman went to the woodpile. He had only put a small piece of leather in and 3 long carrots. He gathered the carrots and wrapped the leather around them. He walked to Lydia and went down on one knee. He handed her the small bundle and placed his hands on her shoulders. Very softly he said to her, "You may never find your sister, but I think you also have a part to play in this. Long ago, linkers didn't have marks before their dragons hatched. Maybe you're a linker. Maybe you're not. But you are very brave to go on your own, and I wish you well. Your father would be very proud of you." Then he dropped his hands down and stood. He thought to tell her that he thought the tunnel went west, and most likely so did her sister, but she had already turned that way, and in a few minutes he could barely make her out. Hushman turned to his wife. He looked at her and the 3 children remaining. He looked at the smoldering homes. He looked at the few bones left from Jarson. His eyes lit on Jarson's wife in her home with her 5 children. He looked back at his wife and he motioned to her. First he pointed at himself and then her, and made his finger go in a circle. Next he had his first and second fingers do a walking motion, and finally he pointed south. Zilda, his wife, understood. She readjusted her 2-year-old daughter in her arms and took her 5-year-old son's hand and headed to Hushman, and then past him to the way he pointed. After she took a step past him, he put a hand on her shoulder, and she paused and looked at him. Hushman made some more motions towards Jarson's family, and she slightly nodded and then headed south. Their home was at the southern edge of the village. There were some more homes farther south, but they were more east of them. Hostman watched after his wife a few minutes, and then he walked over to Jarson's family, put a finger to his lips when the middle son noticed him. The middle son tugged on his mother's dress, and his mother turned around and saw Hostman. Hostman once again put his finger to his lips. Then he made motions to encircle her and all the children, and he made walking motions. Then he pointed to his wife, who he could barely see in the shadows of the night. Sylvie thought a minute as she processed things. Then she nodded towards Hostman. She started touching heads and gently pushing them in the direction of the other woman. The older daughter picked up the younger daughter and headed out first. The oldest boy took the hand of the middle boy and followed. That's when Sylvie missed Lydia. Hostman grabbed her wrist and pulled it forward as he put a finger to his lips once again. Sylvie paused in her panic. Hostman leaned in and whispered, "I saw her leaving. She wants to find her sister. I gave her some carrots we had stashed for the Linkers." He gently tugged on the wrist a couple more times and added, "She will be okay." Sylvie wanted to cry, but right now she couldn't stop Lydia from leaving, and she needed to take the opportunity to leave herself while Hostman was offering. She took the hand of her 6-year-old and followed Hostman, leaving the ashes of their home behind. Aldemnia followed her mother to the communal graveyard. Tomorrow they would probably be here, as Hector once again helped bury the dead. But tonight, Vixie needed her mother. Vixie sat beside her mother's grave as she let out all the tears she had been holding back. Aldemnia wanted to tell her mother they needed to leave, but she would wait a few days until her mother pulled herself back together. Trenton watched Aldemnia trail after her mother towards the graveyard, and then he glanced around at all the people and children that were dead. He felt so helpless. He felt so helpless. He never again wanted to feel the fear he felt tonight. He heard in his mind Paul Millsmith's words of protest moments before the soldiers sliced off his head. He closed his eyes and saw Lydia grab a hold of her sister. His own heart had exploded out of his chest. It didn't help to know that his father would have protested too. He didn't know if he would have been able to catch a hold of Cartman, his brother, or Jovel, his sister, if one of them had taken off towards their father. Trenton shook his head to himself again. He wanted this night not to exist. He didn't want to believe everything they had gone through. He didn't want to believe everything they had was gone. But his father was pacing among their ashes and gripping his fists and cursing under his breath. Bradley finally made it to the trees and headed up the incline. Once he was on the incline, he would walk north a while, until he came to where he sent Coulter into the trees. At that point, he would turn east again if he were confident. If he were unsure, he might rest until he had a little more light. The moon had given him good light in the valley, but it might not be enough in the woods. As he walked along, he received, "Have the soldiers left?" He responded, "Yes, and shortly after I left. I'm going to find the younger boy. Did you say, communicate, or whatever, to me that the younger one was Coulter?" "Yes, I did. And I need to let you know my decision. I decided that because the universe provided you for the boys, and they've already met you, that I'm going to trust you to help them. Moreover, I feel like Libya is already with her dragon, but the images I received when I asked the universe where I should go was to the spot on the river where Libya crossed." "Wait a minute. Libya or Lydia?" "Lydia was out in the village. She was a linker?" "She was a twin. So at times Libya was out in the village, but the people called her Lydia. The names were close enough that a child could answer to either name. Then I've met Libya. I looked for her and didn't know when I found her. That explains why you knew her house but not her. I knew... I get... Oh well, I'm just thinking in my head. I knew where the Linkers were because I got strange vibrations when I neared them or their houses. Oh, that explains so much. Sometimes I would get much stronger vibrations when I was near Lydia, or I guess Libya, than at other times. I couldn't figure that out. You got vibrations around Lydia? Asked Soflin. Bradley paused. I'm pretty sure I did. But I would tell myself that Jarson was smart and he wouldn't have a Linker out. Well, maybe Jarson wasn't so smart if he hadn't protested. Okay, let's get things straight. Soflin thought it quickly. Every person has a breaking point. The soldiers broke Jarson. Jarson was under a lot of stress trying to protect Libya. End of story. There is no smart or not smart. Bradley nodded his understanding. Yes, you're right. Now, along those same lines, the latest ancient text calls you a hunter. But I'm sure the earlier ancient text would call you a better term. A hunter knows where the Linkers are. In ancient times, there must have been a reason for hunters, or whatever the older term. Sorry, I'm not trying to cast negative. You are, in a way, hunting Coulter and Brumman, but you're hunting them to help them. I'll tell more as I learn more. People believe or think that hunters no longer exist, but King Damon-Tade found one and hunted the last group of known Linkers. Oh, wow. So, I would know them without a mark. I do know them without seeing a mark. I hadn't thought about that. No one knows I can do that except you. And we'll keep it that way. Thank you for trusting me, and thanks for doing your part. I think that after I find the old trail and find whatever I need, then I will look for Lydia. In the past, Linkers didn't have symbols until their dragons hatched. Wait, so... Oh, I know the term. Bringers. Or another translation would be uniters. You know the Linkers without their symbol, and you try to bring them to their dragon, to be with their dragon when their dragon hatches. Oh, I knew you were special. Can you locate dragons too? I don't know, thought Bradley as he stopped and raised his eyebrows. I didn't feel the same type of vibrations from the soldiers' dragons other than the vibrations from the fire they breathe. I will stay in touch. Maybe if we have some quiet time tomorrow, I will teach you through our link how to contact me. The witch left him alone with his thoughts, so Bradley walked on. Then he wondered if his father knew his abilities. His father knew a lot, even when they couldn't openly talk about things. If his father knew or guessed, Bradley would have to trust that information stayed with his father. Then his mind wandered onto the conversation with the witch. She said, thought, or communicated earlier that he, Bradley, was special, and now she was telling him how. Apparently, not many people could feel the vibrations, so not many knew of that possibility. If that was true, then maybe his father knew he knew the Linkers, but his father didn't know how. Then Bradley wished he could link with his father, because his father knew a lot. Finally, he came to the top of the incline, and he started walking north. He had more confidence in finding Coulter now with his information, and he wanted to find Coulter first. He hoped Coulter hadn't turned back to go to the village. Of course, if he didn't walk straight, Coulter could be going in circles. Bradley sighed. He would learn soon enough. Hagar walked close to Broman's sleeping form, and he sniffed him. Broman jumped and let out a low scream. Broman could see a dark shape in front of himself. "Oh, you scared me." He rubbed his arm because he felt vibrations on the mark. "Are you my dragon?" "I don't know, but you my boy," thought Hagar. "I don't think we need to talk." "Oh, okay," said Broman. "We can think. It's safer." "Oh, okay," thought Broman. "Come, we go back to cave, and you see my ball, and we sleep without stuff falling on us out of sky." Broman stood up and looked closer. In the moonlight, he could make out little white spots, and he reached his hand up and brushed a few spots off. "Looks like," then he thought, "looks like you slept under some birds, silly dragon." Broman gathered his things and quickly wrapped the cape around everything. Then he and his dragon walked towards the dragon's cave. Broman's heart had slowed considerably from his initial scare, but now he was glad his dragon was sniffing him instead of a dog eating him. Bradley stopped and looked around. This was where he thought he sent Coulter on. He remembered his internal emotions and how his heart was breaking with how cruel he had to be to get Coulter to leave. Then, in his mind, he saw once again how the soldiers mercilessly killed the parents, and when they couldn't explain, killed the parents when they couldn't explain the games in the home. Bradley could almost hear Jarson protesting, saying, "We hoped for children." But Coulter's parents didn't say anything. Bradley saw pure fear on their faces seconds before the swords plunged through. Bradley closed his eyes and held his breath. Then the soldiers with dogs scoured the place looking for the child. The soldiers started yanking people up and asking about the child. Was it a girl or a boy? Or how old was it? Bradley couldn't breathe at that point. Now he was very glad he had sent Coulter away. He had saved Coulter's life. But Jarson had died too soon to try to save the parents. Bradley looked around again as he focused on trying to find Coulter. Then he smelled the dog poop and knew he was correct. This was where he sent Coulter on. So he turned east and continued walking. He wouldn't walk much more because even if he could feel vibrations, his eyes might be able to pick up a trail. Otherwise, he might have to walk in circles himself to find Coulter. Just before Lydia got to the trees, she noticed a bush. She went over because even in the moonlight she could see wisps of smoke coming up from the bush. From watching the soldiers find tunnels tonight, she knew this was the end of their tunnel, and she knew it had to be the longest tunnel in the village. And for a moment she felt pride in her father, but she couldn't think on her father long, or the thoughts would choke her up. Lydia was about to turn and head into the trees when her hand brushed something. It felt like hair. Lydia thought spiderweb at first, but it wasn't sticky. Then she pulled off 2 long strands of hair. She wrapped the strands around her hand and then put her hand to her nose. She didn't smell anything, but decided it was her sister's hair. Lydia pulled 2 strands of hair from her head and wrapped the strands together. She twisted them and then pushed them deep in a pocket. Then she headed into the trees. Inside the trees, she couldn't see as well, but she kept going. She had to find Libya. She had to find Libya. She couldn't stay in the village anymore. Libya and Elloni both stopped at the grass-lined edge, and they both scanned the plains. The moon was full and straight overhead, so they could see quite a distance. But neither moved off the valley floor onto the plains. I could fly across this, thought Elloni. She didn't like the tall grasses and felt they could conceal things. Of course, the grasses could conceal them much better than the valley could. Yes, but flying was a little scary for me. I need a saddler. Well, how would you make one? thought Elloni. I think I need lots of leather and some metal. I don't know how to melt or bend metal. I wish one of my relatives were alive or not under potions, thought Elloni. I would have more information for us. We need to gain knowledge. An owl on the ground in the nearby grasses cooed softly, and Libya turned to look down at it. Then Libya looked at Elloni and thought, if we keep going, we will find some help. The bird says he's an owl, and there are some flowers across the water that look like they're on fire at night. Some people live there, and they can help us. Elloni looked down at the bird and made out its features. She added to her knowledge that the features along with the term owl. Then she looked across the plains. She couldn't see any water, but she believed the water was hiding in the grasses. Did you thank the bird, owl? Yes, I did, thought Libya after a few seconds. Good. We will fly across the plains or grasses. If you're doing okay, we will fly to the water. Libya started tying on her bundle as Elloni laid down for her to mount. After Libya was situated, Elloni took to flight. In a short time, the owl was flying near them, and then he cut in front of Elloni. Wow, he's flying fast for such a little thing, thought Elloni. Yes, but he says we aren't going the right way, thought Libya. You can talk to animals, declared Elloni. Then she slowed up and followed the owl. At this speed, she could more glide. Elloni surmised from her knowledge that they weren't going straight north because they hadn't turned right all the way. They were going somewhere between north and west. And then the word northwest came to her. After a few more minutes of flight, they saw a line of fire. They followed the owl over the water, and then when the owl dove down, Elloni landed, and both Libya and Elloni looked at the beautiful line of flowers. Neither had a name for the tulips. They just knew the flower. They just knew flower. And the tulips looked like they were on fire because yellow lights emitted from within the red flowers. Libya slid down and saw the owl had a rat in his beak, and she heard, Rupert, thank you so much. That rat has been giving us some dreadful trouble today. Oh, who are your friends? Started Libya, when she realized that she hadn't heard the tiny creature with her ears. So she thought, I'm Libya, and this is Elloni. Libya looked up at her dragon and thought, did I get the pronunciation of that right? Elloni nodded her long, slender head once. Libya turned back to the tiny flying creature that looked like a thumb-sized person with wings. Rupert told us that you would help us. I need to make a saddler. More tiny creatures came out, and Libya could hear a slight buzzing from their wings. Elloni and Libya could hear their conversation. Saddler? What's a saddler? Maybe she means saddle. Should we make one and see if that's what she means? Maybe she can describe it to us. There were choruses of agreement, and Libya started to explain what she meant, but then she saw the creatures flying together and changing shape and color until a saddle floated in the air before her. Libya pointed to it and said, That's what I mean. That's what I meant. What is that? One creature flew closer and thought, That's a saddle. That's what I need to make, thought Libya. We could just get one, thought another creature. Dante, we don't just take things, thought a creature. We have to fight some way, thought Dante. The other creature sighed. She looked at Libya and Elloni and thought, You both look young. I'm 9, thought Libya. And I just hatched, thought Elloni. The creature looked at Rupert, who was working away at eating the rat. She thought, Rupert, you brought them to us for a reason, so we need to help them. Rupert didn't look up. He just kept eating. The lead creature called together a circle of several other creatures, and then Libya could hear their wings vibrating. She heard different sounds, almost like their wings played a song. and she realized, as Elloni thought to her, they are communicating. After a few minutes, the lead creature came to Libya. She fluttered before her and thought, I'm Felicity, and humans call us fairy shifters. But among ourselves, we are tailors. But not because of what the word tailor means to you. It will take us a little bit of time to shut down our village, but Hysor and his wife Bitsy will go with you. Elloni thought, but we don't know exactly where we are going. We discussed that too. Hysor and Bitsy will lead you to a cave, not too far from here. We think you need to go there first. There are 2 orbs or eggs there. One is white and just sleeps. The other is copper and plays a message. We will meet you at the cave and then decide our next step. Also, after you listen to the message, I will show you the book we found, so our decision can have more substance. Elloni nodded, and the 2 creatures flew forward. Hysor, the husband, thought, We will attach to your scales as you fly. Elloni lowered herself for Libya to climb up, and then once she felt them attached, she thought to see if everyone was ready. She lifted off into the air once more, leaving Ruford and the rest of the tailors behind. Hysor directed Elloni northwest to the cave. Libya was nervous flying, but she looked over her shoulder and saw the lights on the flowers go out and realized that the fire flowers were probably the fairy shifters' homes. Soflin had walked west along the river's edge. She had turned northwest when the river had turned. Once the river turned north, she knew she was getting closer to where she expected Libya to cross. At that point, she started her magic to find any magical traces of Libya, to find what the vision was leading her towards. She had her magic going for over an hour as she headed north. Then she paused and stretched. She looked up in the sky, and the moon was already heading down. She wasn't sure when she should sleep, because she needed to be awake and alert when the soldiers came around, but she didn't know when that would be. King Damantade had plenty of soldiers, so that he could send them in shifts. Soflin found a log and sat down. She would rest a few minutes and see if the universe had any wisdom for her. She was inside the woods, where she couldn't really see the water, but she could hear its flow. The trees rustled with slight and occasional breezes. Crickets and frogs made their noises, and overall, in the present moment, it was very tranquil. Soflin closed her eyes and breathed in and out slowly several times, and an image came to her. She saw an egg in a cave and knew it was about to hatch. She watched it slowly rock back and forth, and from the moonlight that filtered in the cave, she could see the cracks. Then very suddenly, a head pushed up through the top of the egg, so fast it seemed to pop out. Soflin covered her mouth as a small laugh escaped her. She couldn't quite make out the dragon's colors in the dim light, as the large, thick head looked around the cave. Then she heard a slight splash, and came back to her surroundings. She leaned to her left, she leaned to her right, and her left again, as she tried to look around the trees. She was not invisible, and she didn't cast that charm yet, but she did ease off the log and ease forward to the closest tree. Soflin peered around the tree. Lydia had found herself at the edge of the river, just like her sister had. She had hopped over to the same rock her sister had. She gazed around and decided to tread on the top of the rocks as long as possible, because entering the water scared her. Then, without warning, a bright light flashed on her arm, and a symbol appeared. Lydia was extremely terrified. She didn't know she was a linker, and the light meant her dragon just hatched. She thought somehow the soldiers had found her, and in her fright she turned and looked every direction. Sophlin hurried out of the woods and motioned to her. "Libya, come to me. You're safe with me." Lydia froze as she gazed at Sophlin, and her heart pounded hard in her chest, and her ears throbbed with the sound of her heartbeat. Sophlin saw the fear on the girl's face. Then she thought, Libya's dragon hatched last night. Does she have 2 dragons? Oh, wait. Bradley had vibrations. She motioned again. "Lydia! You are Lydia, not your sister Libya. Come, let's get away from the waterway." Lydia glanced over her shoulder once more. Truly, she hadn't known what she was doing when she left the village. She didn't know how she was going to survive or find her sister. She glanced down to her arm and held her arm towards the woman. "The soldiers did something to me so they can find me. I wasn't supposed to leave the village." Sophlin chuckled a little. No, child. You're a Linkla too. Your dragon just hatched, and we need to find it. Come, the soldiers don't know about you. That will be to our advantage." Lydia carefully looked at the rocks and planned her path to the other side of the river. Once she was across, Sophlin wrapped an arm around her shoulders and led her into the woods. "We will seek shelter in the mountains and for the rest of the night. Then we will see if the universe will show us where your dragon is." "Okay," said Lydia as she tried to catch her breath. "I want to find my sister too." "All in good time," said Sophlin. "I cast a charm on her to know how she is doing, and she is already with her dragon. And they have started on her path. We can't disrupt that. And it seems you have your own path. And believe me, the soldiers don't know where you are." Lydia accepted that, and they headed deeper into the woods and up the mountain slope. Browser jerked awake as the symbol on his arm lit up again. He brought his arm close to his body as possible to douse the light, and he listened for movement. He didn't hear anything, so maybe the guards were sleeping or weren't there. He thought to Dronsnide, "Another one hatched. How many is that now? 3 or 4? Did I dream some hatched?" "My count is now 4, thought Dronsnide. "You don't normally think to me in your sleep, at least not in any coherent way." "We have to get out of here," thought Browser. "We can't let the babies come here seeking you." "I've been working on it. Do you have any magic left?" "I haven't tried magic since we've been here. We agreed that if I couldn't get us out, then it was best not to show what I could do." "True," thought Dronsnide. "Then let us try to think to the hatchlings or their linkers." "Well, hopefully we are tremendously unsuccessful with that, because that would mean they are way too close." "Then can you at least use magic so that no more hatchlings are learned about?" Browser nodded his head in his silent dark self. "Yes, I think I remember a charm to help with that." As Libya held on to Elloni's long whiskers, she could see and feel her symbol light up again. She no longer had her arm wrapped, and the wrap now tied her bundle onto her. Still, Libya wasn't sure why her symbol kept lighting up, especially now that she had found her dragon. But she briefly thought of her pa's words that she had 10 dragons to find. She sighed to herself and concentrated on hanging on. She certainly didn't want to fall off. And then she surely wouldn't find any more dragons. "Here's my cave," thought Hagar. "My ball in there." "You talk like a baby," said Broman. "And you talk out loud," thought Hagar. "Sorry," thought Broman as he entered the cave. The moonlight barely filtered in, and Broman stepped on something that crunched under his feet. He squatted down and set his bundle to the side. He looked at the symbol on his arm, although he couldn't quite make it out in the dim light. He rubbed the symbol and then ran his hand over the shell fragments. Hagar shook himself. "What you want?" Broman looked over to his dragon. He had forgotten that the little dragon felt it when he rubbed the symbol. He thought to him, You just hatched today or yesterday. I don't know how deep the night is. Anyway, you are a baby. Where's this ball you wanted me to see?" Hagar nodded his head towards the copper orb. Brahman stood up and walked over to it. When he picked it up, he pressed the button and the message started playing. Brahman jumped back and dropped the ball. After a few minutes, Brahman realized what happened, and he rolled the ball so the message would be upright. After the message finished, he pressed the button again and paid more attention. Once the message finished the second time, Brahman sat on the floor of the cave and folded his legs under him. His pa had told him a few things, and apparently those things were true. Bradley, the other boy, had told him about his dragon, and that was also true. But he was just one boy, and he didn't know what to do. The message talked about a pride. He wondered if that was like a pack of wolves, a flick of birds, a hired of deer. Brahman shook his head to himself. So many words. He asked his pa many times for the words, but he couldn't always remember them all. "What are you thinking? You're not thinking with me. Are you mad at me?" Brahman looked up at the baby dragon. He said aloud, "I'm not mad. In my own way, I'm a baby too. I just turned 10 with the last full moon. The one before this one. Or somewhere close to it. And 10 is a lot older than a day. But there is so much to learn. He motioned to the orb. "I can't go fight all of that. But the message said a pack. A pride. So that's hopeful that we have help. But where are they? How do we find them? What skills should we learn first? I wish that boy Bradley had come with me. He would know more." "Maybe we find him first," thought Hagar. "Yeah," agreed Brahman. "I'm very tempted to do that. But maybe we sleep a little first without birds pooping on us, and then we search tomorrow in the light." He sighed and thought a little. "Or, on the other hand..." "What you mean, on other hand? You have nothing in either hand." Brahman twisted his mouth a bit. "My pa used to say that. I asked him one time, and he said there's always more than one way to think about things. So you should always think at least twice." He would say, "on the other hand." And I learned that the near opposite words didn't, take away his first words. "Oh," thought Hagar. "Anyway, on the other hand, the soldiers could see better in the light, just like we can. So it might be better to move in the dark, especially with the moon light, and be still during the day." Hagar looked down to his feet. "I have 4 hands. Should I think 4 ways? Brahman looked at the baby dragon and laughed a little. He thought, "Yes, you should think as many ways as you can. I thinking I a little tired, and soldiers can see us in the light if we sit still." Brahman nodded. "Let's sleep a little. It will take the soldiers time to get to us, so we will move with the first sunlight we see." Brahman arranged his rags and cloak and sat down to sleep at least a little. Hagar curled up nearby. Okay, writers, that is the end of chapter 4 and 5. Chapter 5's title was the same as the subtitle of the book, and I'm sure you understand why. Many people had a breaking point. They could not continue to live in such fear. They had to do something, and that something was to leave the village. Previously, Aldemia thought to leave, but she knew her mother's response would be that the soldiers would kill someone if they didn't count them. And that was a heavy burden, but tonight they killed many people. Hoshman already lost a child because the soldiers killed one of his daughters before the story started, but at this point he told Bradley to just go, knowing that if he stayed at that point, somebody could die. But he told Bradley, just go. And then, of course, I tell you every time it's a rough draft, so I found like 3 mistakes. 2 for sure, 2 misspellings, and then 1 where I read the words different than what I had typed them, and so I need to fix those things. So it is a rough draft, but I hope you're enjoying it. Leave a comment below on if you would just leave the village. The soldiers just trampled your garden and burned your home. So would you stay or would you leave? Also, leave a comment on if you thought about the symbol on Lydia. Did you think, whew, I'm so glad the symbol didn't light up while she was in the village? Or did you think like Lydia did, that the soldiers somehow knew she escaped and where she was? What did you think? Leave the comment. Leave a comment on if you were Broman and how you would feel if you woke up and a dragon was sniffing you. Visit my website, bymckella.com, and read some character bios. If you read some, then leave a comment on which ones you've read. Join me Tuesday for writing prompt to add to our cave story, I could say story with the cave. Join me Friday for Chapter 6 of Elloni's Pride, Breaking Point, A New Way to Live. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe and the bell so we can write together. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Michaela with Write with Michaela. Bye for now.